Welcome to the Beyond Divorce Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Welcome, everyone, to part 2 of the Ation series. We're actually here, Armando, going to be discussing parentification, aren't we?
Ooh, parentification.
Yeah, and I think you're going to take the lead on this, aren't you?
I think I am. I think that's what I was tasked with doing.
Well, task or not, I'm excited. And I know that you and I have, in our therapy journey, have dealt with this multiple times and discussed it, even probably educated some people on what it is and how it's different than the other Asians. So I hope you'll chime in as also and give some feedback.
Absolutely.
Into that. Okay. Well, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Please make sure you check us out on all the platforms and podcasts that you can find us on. We're real excited. We're getting some people that are commenting like on YouTube and different places that are just interacting with us so that we can actually be a little bit more helpful specifically. Some of them are just compliments. And I'll tell you that anyone that I've caught or seen or saw me in person, and it helps us know that we're doing something that's helpful.
That's exciting.
It is exciting.
It's really
and I
exciting.
love it. So thank you for doing that, everyone. We appreciate you so much. So where do you want to start with this?
Well, so when we talk about parentification, right, that may be something that our listeners don't know what that is. So what is parentification, Michael? When somebody comes in or you hear something, what is parentification? Let's start there. What's the definition?
Well, I think what I'll start with is spelling it for people so they know what we're saying. Parent, parentification. And it's when a child assumes the role of a parent. So it's really a parental responsibility that the child is now making their own responsibility. And not on purpose. Typically it's kind of given to them by the parent or by a parent. Sometimes both parents can do that. And so the child assumes a parental role in the relationship.
So when they take on that role, what does that do to that child?
Oh gosh, I can spend the whole episode. What does it do? What does it do? Because it does things to them as a child, as an adult, and the emotions that they experience. So, what it really does to the child is it makes the child take a responsibility that's not theirs, and it puts them in a position to fail.
Oh, talk to me about that fail.
Yeah. So what it basically means is like when a kid is taking on a responsibility that isn't theirs, there's no way for them to be successful in it. And they typically are taking off one of two burdens from a parent. They're taking off an emotional burden, which is probably the most common, or a physical burden.
Okay. Say that again.
An emotional burden or a physical burden.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the physical burden, I believe if you look it up, parentification, you'll find it as instrumental, I think is actually how they say it.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's instrumental or kind of logistical.
Correct. And I call it physical because you're actually having to do something specific. Emotional parentification is the most common that I see, especially in therapy, which is where the child believes it's their responsibility to care for the parent. So it's a reversal of roles. So instead of the parent taking care of the child's emotional needs, the child is taking care of the parent's emotional needs.
Okay, well, let's get into that. Let's first start with the instrumental or the physical parentification. What are some examples of that? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, well, I can just give an example of cases. So let's say mom and dad divorce. The child then assumes the roles that the dad would have. Mm-hmm. So I've even been told, like by a parent, like it's almost like my son has taken on the role of, or dad might say this, but like pseudo husband or pseudo wife if it's his daughter. And what they're really describing there is parentifying. They're using physical parentification. So they're tasked with, the house cleaning or cutting the grass or paying the bills. That's a big one. When the kids, like the mom is just so out of it, they can't do things. I'm in a depressed state or whatever's going on, and the child feels it's their responsibility to care for that parent or cooking for them.
Paying the bills.
I did have a kid do that.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the parents were not, they were a different nationality, didn't speak the language. The child did. And so the child was tasked with paying the bills. I don't think it was done in ill will.
Mm-hmm.
But what the position it put the child in is the child kind of loses their own childhood. They grow up too quick.
Yeah.
And so all those little key areas that you want to experience as a child so that you can become, well-rounded in some ways, you're tasked with this other thing. Now, I will say this. I think if a child navigates being parentified well, they actually can develop some really unique skills.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that as you were speaking, I thought too, I've had several clients where the young man or even a young lady will say like, oh, now I'm the man of the house, right? Like I'm the man of the house. I have to do this now. My dad is gone or my mom is gone, and now I'm taking that role. And, I think, like you said, I don't know that it's intentional. I think it's just that parent needs that help, needs that assist. They need that little help with that little layup.
Yep.
And being able to do that.
Do you want to know when it's problematic, though? Is when that parent just meets another partner and decides that they're going to start a new relationship. Well, now the child's going to hold on. Now they're taking my job.
Ah, yes.
Makes sense? Because you used me as the pseudo person to help, and now you're bringing another person in. And so sometimes you get that reaction from the child.
So I've seen that a lot with, I've had different cases and scenarios where the oldest child was taking care of the younger siblings, right? During the divorce or when they move from one home to the other home, and there's a lot of siblings and the oldest one kind of takes that role. And so once they kind of get, stabled and they figure out their role, the parent is like, okay, now I'm the parent. I'm going to take this back. And then they're clashing because
the oldest child and the parent.
The oldest child and the parent are now clashing because it's like, well, wait a minute, that's my job. And the parent's like, no, that's my job. That was never supposed to be your job. But they became empowered.
Yes, you gave me a parental responsibility when you were unavailable, and now you're wanting to take it back.
Yeah. You put me up here as like your peer, and now you're telling me I have to listen to you? Who the heck are you?
Well, and that's the whole point of parentification is the mixing of those roles, right?
Oh, the dynamic.
The dynamic mixes. Yeah, because what you just described there is, you're the kid, now you're the head. You're the head child. You're the head elf, right? Right? Like, okay, you're the head honcho while I'm out. Well, then the parent comes back to reassume that role and says it's not your responsibility, it has to be brought down. And here's the hard part. Where do they hear that? They might hear it in a courtroom. They can hear it in a counseling office. And so that parent has to change where they put that kid and bring them back down. And they know the kid's not going to respond well to that. So you see what I'm saying? Like, it creates a dynamic that should never exist. And parentifying can do that.
Well, what's interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about I'm going to make a note and I'll come back.
Okay, that's fine.
And then, so that's the physical or the instrumental parentification.
Yes.
What is the emotional parentification? What is that?
I like to call it the most common. The most common of emotional parentification is where the child really assumes the role of taking care of the parent, caring for their emotional needs. So if you have a parent who's really struggling with the divorce, they maybe go into a depressive state. Maybe they're in the grief cycle. They've hit that depressive state and they're deep in it. That child then either does a couple of things. They come in and they console the parent, or I'll take care of this for you so you don't have to do X. They may come in and act as their protector. The child becomes the protector of the parent. And it's really interesting because when I see a kid that's superly overly protective of a parent, I don't think alienation right away. The first thing I think is parentification. And I'm assuming that child feels like they become the emotional guardian of the parent is maybe a way to say it.
So it's almost like a fear-based thing is what I'm
constantly hearing. Fear-based. Because how can my parent take care of me if I can't take care of them? If they're in a bad place, how are they supposed to care for me? Because you think there's a subconscious thing built into these children.
It's my job now to take care of this parent. I've assumed the role of the parent to take on.
So Jen, earlier in the first part of the Ation series, talked about, the children kind of taking the lead of being a parent. What I think she's trying to describe there is that emotional piece where that kid becomes that, I got to care for you, I have to take care of you. And what ends up happening when a child does that is when the child becomes the guardian of a parent's emotions, right? And the roles then get reversed. It's really hard to untie it. To untie the knot. Correct.
So if I'm worried about you, so let me make sure I understand. If I'm worried about you, right? If you're my parent and I'm worried about you and it's time to go see mom,
Yes.
well, who's going to take care of, Dad Michael? I have to do that. So I can't leave. I need to stay and take care of you because you are not equipped. I feel like you're not equipped to take care of yourself. It's my job.
And so what it does to you, the child, is there's a level of insecurity that's built into you if you're not available to care for me.
Wow, that's deep.
Well, it is, because one of the things I talked to Jen about in the first part of the Ation series, Triangulation, is kids crave two things, which is love, looks like time, and security. So when there's an insecurity or my parents not secure or not in themselves, it's my job to secure them so they can reassure me or secure.
They're gonna fill in that. They're gonna fill in that gap. They're gonna kind of put that in.
Maybe that's what kids are doing the whole time, is gap filling.
Oh, that's really.
You suppose that in a divorce, that's all the kids are doing is just filling gaps, finding the holes, and go, how do I fill that? How do I fill that? How do I fill that?
So listening to that, my brain goes to dogs, because we're all kind of social creatures, and when the pack, if you have a dog and you're struggling, your dog becomes aggressive all of a sudden. It's your dog assuming that role as pack leader because you're stressed. And that's exactly what's going on here with this child. This child is becoming the pack leader. They're becoming the parent in the household.
Well, and if you think, do you recall studying Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Absolutely.
And so there's the needs that are in the base point. They have to be met before they can move up.
Mm-hmm.
I think when a divorce happens, right, it's almost like a death. There's an emotional death that occurs there, right? So that's why I think we go through the grief cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kids are going through it also. But kids aren't grieving first. I think what kids are doing is watching how the parents are responding, then determining how are they supposed to respond to that, which then puts them in places like roles, like you and I talked about, right? The gatekeeper, distractor, avoider. And so they assume all these things to fill in these gaps. But parentifying is the most common, in my opinion, is the most common thing that parents do to their children, consciously or subconsciously.
So that kind of leads to my next question is, how intentional is this, right? Because people are going to want to say that, like, you're saying parentification, and we'll talk about this later, but alienation, they're going to want to label it as that, right? And they want to label it as, oh, you're purposefully, oh, mom is purposefully doing that, dad is purposefully keeping, kid from coming over here. So how intentional or unintentional is it?
It's a great question. I think that it depends on the person who's engaged in it. I think once they know they're doing it and they continue to do it, now it's intentional.
So if you point it out to somebody, and they continue to do it, it becomes a little bit more intentional.
I think that's where the psychoeducation can fill in that gap. However, I think the issue that we're having with most people is they're claiming alienation when what they're really describing is parentification.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question for me becomes, are we really starting with parentification and adapting into alienation? Like it evolves? Is there an evolution? Does it really start one and then kind of evolve into another? Maybe that's why we have an Ation series, Triangulation, Parentification, Alienation.
Which turns into fear, right?
Yes.
Like that fear-based thing. Fear makes us all sorts of things, right? It becomes, and I think about that as, if you're if you're doing these actions, I don't know that it's intentional, but your fear is transforming you into that need, and that kid is filling that gap.
Well, fear is typically projected in some form, isn't it? And I think here's something really kind of cool. I think if you want to know if someone's in a fear place, they'll use terms like "what if."
Mm-hmm.
You ever notice that? They'll say, well, what if this? And what if that? That's an angst place.
That anxiety kind of builds.
Is built in, right? Right. We're not talking about anxiety on a
no.
on a DSM level.
No, not an anxiety disorder.
I always say angst, right? So yes, anxiety, angst. When the angst is present, or there's fear built in, because those are like cousins, right? You have this what if. You hear the what ifs in their conversations. Someone told me that if you know someone's in a faith place, they say things like even if.
Oh, even if.
So fear-based is what if, faith-based is even if.
Because I love you no matter.
Even if.
Even if. So as you were talking, I thought about this, and it's almost like the love that a child has for a parent, or the desire to take care of that parent, kind of becomes perverted or changed so much in parentification.
Yes.
And I think I want our listeners to hear that, because we don't ever want that, right? We don't want our love to be perverted. We don't want it to be changed into something that it's not, something ugly that's actually harmful, because can parentification be harmful to the child?
Parentification is harmful to the child, because it's almost a robbing of sorts. It's I think when a parent is engaged in parentifying a child, there's a selfish component to it, whether the parent recognizes or not, because it's really the child is fulfilling something within me. The parent is not opposed to it because they see it as how loving their child is toward them. I think there's an interpretation that the kid and I are close.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You know, we're like best friends.
What do you do when you hear that? When you hear a parent say, "Oh, I'm the child's best friend. I'm best friends with my child."
I think I make a face. If you ask me what I do, I'm in a session. I'm probably making a face, like, you know, I'm kind of squinting my eyes, like, what? You know, it hit my ears a little weird. I think I ask for a description most cases. I'll say, tell me what you mean, or how'd you get so close? You know, would the child agree that you're close? Yeah, and there's the what you're looking for is the protective nature, right? I don't think there's an issue with having a close relationship with your parent. That's probably a good thing. But it's that protective nature that you go, okay, wait a second. If the child is protecting the parent, we're probably engaged in some level of parentification. Makes sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah. And that's kind of leads me into what I want to talk about a little bit earlier was, you know, these problems really stem out whenever there's a new partner that comes into the family, right? If I'm parentified and I'm the man of the house, you know, I'm the captain now, right? And somebody else comes in, Dad's gone, and now I'm in charge, and this new person comes in, and now there's that conflict between, you know, the new partner and this. What are the new roles? Who are you in my house? This is my house.
How are you going to take away the roles that I've created, right, and built so that I can reassure myself and my other parent?
Absolutely.
Right, because now there's a role that I've played has helped reassure, secure. I know how this works. And you're coming in and changing that.
And I have to let go. I don't know you, guy, and now I have to let that go. And I think that causes issues too.
100%.
And I think it's important for our listeners to see that is that it is stemming. It's not just, you know, the relationship with the kid, but if you're going to have a new relationship or how it can just get out of control.
Well, I think what you're saying is if you're a parent engaged in parentification, you don't realize the kind of problem you're creating for a later event.
Exactly.
You're really building an issue that's going to come up later at some time when your relationships, you know, continue to expand. Like if you're going to go into a dating relationship or a romantic one, you've put your child in this role to take care of you. You're going to feel like you have a parent. Like, why? Who are you to get to tell me? And you're going to have to realign them, and they're not going to like it.
No. You've changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Bingo. So, who likes that?
Nobody.
Okay, continue.
Right? So then how do we respond? How do we change that, right? We've kind of talked about what it kind of looks like. We've talked about the dangers and how much it can just spiral out of control and it can look like. What do we do?
Well, you know, that's a great question, Armando. I think the first thing I'd want parents to do is really ask, is this really about me or them? I think you got to start with that question.
Am I the problem?
Well, in a sense, yeah. Or what need am I trying to get fulfilled and whose responsibility is it? Because typically a parentifying parent is trying to fill a need and they're having the kid be the responsible party.
Wow.
So I think you start with, you know, what's the need that I have and whose responsibility is it to fill it? And if I go, it's my child's responsibility, that's when you know something's off. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Because when you're a parent and you're parenting a child, it is ultimately your responsibility, right? Now, I know parents struggle with like, you know, my kid doesn't want to go to school, or here's the fun one. My kid doesn't want to go with the other parent and I can't force them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to physically pull them out of the car.
Right.
And then my comment to that is, it sounds like they're in charge.
How did they get there? How did they get to drive the bus? How did they get to be in charge?
Well, who do you think gave them that kind of power? You know, either you're lying to me and you really can't get them out of the car, you just don't want to. Or you really don't have any control of your child to go, wait, I'm in charge, you're the child, I'm the parent. So there's a role reversal that happened here that's not okay. You know, and I did this to a mom once. I said, you seem to feel guilty that you're having to require your child to go with the person you don't like.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. You should have seen their response. They were like, oh my gosh, you see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so really that's the point is your guilt, right, of having to make your kid go with a person that you left, that you divorced, is a hard thing for you because you're like, I get to stay away, but I can't help you stay away if you don't like it. And so you feel guilty. So now you're like, well, it's not really my thing. It's their thing.
It's their thing.
You want to push it off. You're parentifying now.
You've given it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be, yeah, I'm okay if they go with their other parent.
But are you?
Okay. So how do you respond is you check yourself. And you first go with, is this really about me or them? And when it's about you, the person, you need to own that. And that's what I think you do first to unparentify a child. The second thing I think you do is make sure that your roles are clear with your kid.
Oh, boundaries.
100%. Yeah. And I think what people confuse about boundaries is they think a boundary is what you tell the other person to do.
Yeah.
A boundary is how you're going to respond.
This is my response when something happens to me.
So here's an example of boundary. You don't say, don't yell at me because if you yell, I'm not going to talk to you. That's not a boundary. That's a request for them to stop yelling. A boundary is if you continue to yell, I'll choose not to have this conversation. Because who am I controlling?
Myself.
That's a boundary.
I had a conversation earlier with a parent just like that.
Yep.
The kids yelling. I was like, I stopped talking to them.
Yep. And so then you set a boundary with the kid that says, let me make sure you understand something. There's what you want, and there's what I need you to do. And what you want and what I need may not match, but when I say this is what's happening, that's what we're doing. Now, you can say I don't like it, this is not fun for me, whatever. Happy to talk to you about it.
So what does a parent do if they catch themselves, if, you have that older sibling and you're just like, hey, I need you to watch your siblings a little bit? Like, where's the fine line? Because, listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, I think I was a little parentified growing up.
Yep. I want you to watch the kiddos. And if they disregard something you ask them to do, I don't want you to keep asking. I want you to let me know.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you let me know, I get to be parent. I'll get on the phone with the kid. Let me be the redirector.
So you still giving them? Yeah. You're still the captain. They're the lieutenant.
Well,
if you
look
will.
at this. In divorce cases, sometimes parents are supervised. Right? Mm-hmm. They go to supervision, and someone they don't know is supervising them. The supervisor's job, is it to tell them how to parent?
No.
It's to do what?
To just watch.
So when you ask your kid, hey, I'm going to go run an errand down the road, can you watch your siblings? What are they supposed to be doing?
Just watch.
Watch the siblings, making sure everything's good, the house doesn't catch fire, whatever.
They're safe, right?
Yeah. And the kid says, I'm going to go to my friend's house. Hey, we didn't ask mom, don't go. And the kid goes, well, I'm going anyway. Should they be going, if you go, I'm blah, blah, blah. No, they should say, well, I'll just call mom. Or I'll call dad or whoever, the parent is. And say, hey, I was telling John not to go to his friend's house, but he went anyway. And go, no problem. I'll get in touch with which friend's house he go to. He went to Carla's. Okay, I'll call Carla and I'll get it figured out.
Take care of that.
Exactly. So you're staying in the role of parent.
Just that self-awareness of like, okay, how much power am I giving or not giving to?
And you know what's funny is the kids don't want really, and honestly, I don't think they really want that power. And I think Jen even said this in the first part is kids don't want to have to choose anyway. You know what I mean? In most cases. So a parentified child is almost forced to choose.
Mm-hmm. They don't want to. They're filling that gap.
Yeah. And so then when you bring a kid to me who's been in the role of parentified, right? They don't want to give it up because if they give it up, now they're uncertain again.
Well, it's still that fear-based, right? Like that fear has not been fixed, right? It was built out of fear, that love, because if I give that up, that means I don't love my parent enough to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll just say something personal. When my mom died, and I know my dad was doing the best job he could to deal with his sadness of losing my mother, just as much as I was. But I remember I was in the tree. We're at the cemetery. My dad's, having his moment with my mom. I'm up in the tree, or I'm by the tree, something. And I'm looking at my dad, I remember. And all I'm doing is just watching how he's dealing with his grief. Because I don't know how to deal with my emotion either. But my dealing with it wasn't trying to figure out if I was sad. I was trying to make sure my dad was okay. He's all I had left. I lost my mom. All I have is my dad. I need to know my dad's okay. So I wasn't grieving my mom as much as I was going, is my dad okay?
Is my dad going to be okay?
Did my dad know that at the time? Probably not.
No.
So what do I want parents to understand is when you're in a divorce, the first thing kids are asking is, are you okay?
They're looking to the parents, are they?
They're looking to the parents. Now, so the question that the parents probably ask is, what if we're not okay? It's okay to say, hey, I'm not okay, but I'm okay enough to still be your parent.
I'm still going to take care of you, right?
100%. There's got to be a reassurance that I'm still going to care for you. And parents, I think Janan says this, give yourself some slack as a parent. Like, give yourself some grace.
Give yourself some grace.
Says it. Because parents will hear me say that and say, but Michael, I'm struggling. Why don't you come see us?
Yeah.
You don't need a court order to come check in and say, man, I'm going through divorce and I'm struggling. My emotions are out of whack. I'm sad. I don't know if I'm grieving. I leak. I'm crying. I'm leaking,
Right. You guys are doing that thing.
Yeah, you guys are doing that.
They're doing that thing. Yeah.
They're kicking in again. No, it's that thing where I want parents to say, hey, look, we're here to help you through it. Armando, not to say personal stuff, but do you think all of us counselors ended up here?
I mean,
because of our own stuff.
Again, talking to you, there definitely was some parentification. I'm like, that sounds familiar.
Well,
little shout out there to.
Well, do you suppose that do you think kids have to be in a divorce to be parentified?
No,
I don't either. See,
No.
I think that's the deal here is just it's more likely to happen in a divorce. I think
maybe not even a divorce, but any kind of massive trauma that occurs in a family. Because if the parent's not okay, the kids are going to fill that gap, right?
Well, true. With my mother's death, you're right. It was a trauma for me and my father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a great point.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have to, as adults, as parents, recognize, okay, are we okay? Like, where am I? What do I need to do to make sure I'm okay? Because remember that kid is going to look to us.
Yeah. Is that the check yourself before you wreck yourself?
And check yourself. Is my engine light coming on? Like, what are we doing?
Engine light's a warning. I just, it's not anything other than, hey, just check in on this.
That's it.
That's what emotions are,
That's
right?
it.
They're your little checkers. Tick, 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 tick. Yeah.
So I guess, just to kind of recap, to kind of look at everything that we've talked about, parentification, it is just that kid taking on that role, that responsibility, whether that be physical or instrumental or emotional.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
What did I miss? Did I miss anything on that?
No. I think there's two roles. There's two types of parentification. Oh, the one thing we need to say, though, is you can do both.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like you can be in the instrumental stage and the emotional stage at the same time.
Definitely.
But it's more likely the emotional is what's occurring. I think emotional is more common than the instrumental.
I think the emotional, there's a bigger potential for damage to the child, right?
Oh, wow.
I think if I'm listening to you, I think that's what I'm hearing.
Well, yes.
So, okay. And then just making sure we check ourselves to make sure, are we doing that?
Yes.
And is my fear, is that spilling over onto that child?
100%. I think you start with, is this mine or theirs? I mean, that's the question. Is this mine or theirs? If it's yours, who owns that?
Yeah.
Make sense?
So what's interesting is I've asked parents before, is like, does your child think it's their job to protect you? Like, are they in charge of policing your emotions?
What do you get from that?
Well, at first they'll say, of course not, no. And then as the sessions go on, I'll ask back and the parent will be like, well, you asked me that question and I'm a little worried that they think that. So
they probably want to know how to correct it.
And that's where we had that conversation about, then you need to let them know, like, hey, baby, I got this. I don't.
Let me say this for parents real quick before we wrap up. When your child is engaged in parentification with you, the parent, it feels really good.
Because they're meeting your need. They're taking care of that.
They're filling a gap that you have within yourself. And if you allow it to stay that way, you are robbing the child of their childhood.
Say that again.
If you allow it to stay that way, you are robbing the child of their childhood. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
I don't believe that most people that are engaged in parentification do it intentionally to harm. They're doing it to fill a hole because it feels good, but it doesn't mean it is.
Which, again, I think that goes back to making sure that we check ourselves and making sure, are we okay? What do we need to do to be okay? So we're not relying on our children to do that.
And when we're not okay, not giving it to our kid. Yeah. You can bring it to us. Well, here's a question. What if they can't afford counseling?
I mean, there are plenty of opportunities. There's church groups, there's organizations, there's lots of things out there to kind of help process that grief or that trauma or that fear.
Here's what I'll tell you. I've never in life found something that's not available to you when you need help. And if it's not available, create it.
I like that.
If it doesn't exist, build it.
Make it.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Don't excuse yourself from it. Right? That's easy. Everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do something. Right? So, I'll tell you what's really amazing. I teach this to people is when you're really going through a rough time. So for those parents that are going through a rough time and maybe not realizing they might be parentifying their kids through the result is if you actually spend some time with gratitude, you change your brain. Right? So like, I wish parents would spend more time being thankful for what they're thankful for. I may not like that our marriage split up. I may not like being a single parent, or I may not like the struggles with money or whatever else you're dealing with. But I'm really thankful that I have my kid.
No, I love that.
Yeah, because, I've done it with parents. I put them in the room together and I said, hey, I know you may not like so-and-so, but without them, you don't have this kid.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I always like to flip the script and say, what is fertilizer? It's just crap. And what's the biggest? Yeah, what's the? And we pour it on stuff, and it makes things bigger and stronger, and it grows. And I think that's, I don't know, but I agree with you. If we reframe things and we think about things a little bit different, it does change our outlook and our mentality.
And maybe that's the last part of that is the task is be willing to reframe it.
Be willing to reframe it.
Be willing. Reframe it. Be willing to reframe it. So, anything else?
No, I think that's pretty good. So where can they follow us, Michael?
Well, Instagram, Facebook. Instagram, Brighter Possibilities Family Counseling. Facebook, I believe it's Brighter Possibilities FC. If I maybe got those backwards. If I got them backwards, it's Brighter Possibilities FC. Instagram, Brighter Possibilities Family Counseling. Facebook, that's accurate. And also the podcast, all YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Go check us out. We can't wait to hear from you. We love doing the Ation series. It's such a big deal because it's more than just alienation.
It is. And send questions. If anybody has any questions or we kind of picked your interest, please comment.
You want a question, don't you?
I'm always ready for a question. I'm better at asking questions than I am.
Send us a question. We'd love it. Thank you for being here, everyone, and keep moving forward.